What goes into a first line that is so captivating that the reader can't put the book down? And they start recommending it everywhere, and you maybe sell millions of copies worldwide. If you're not familiar with me, I'm Shirley Jump. I'm a New York Times, USA Today, Publishers Weekly, Wall Street Journal best-selling author. I've published 87 books in 24 countries, and I've sold 8 million copies. That said, is every one of my first lines absolutely amazing? Probably not. I do agonize over them and spend a lot of time on them, but you can't make everything perfect. And I do the best I possibly can at that moment in time with that book. And with every book, I try to be better. And I use the tips and techniques that I share with you guys in my own books as well. There are 4 things your first line should definitely do, and one thing that I'm going to tell you that you may be surprised by. Your first line has to set up your genre. There's a book out there called A Story is a Promise. I forget who wrote it, but basically the premise of that is that the first page of your book is a promise to the reader. This is the ride we're going to go on. And so you want that first line to meet that promise. Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan is a second chance romance. And so that first line sets you up already with the genre. The first line sets you up right away with the genre. Do people remember the exact moment they fall in love? So boom, we know it's about love, right? The next 2 lines carry that forward even further. I do. Yasmin brought me homemade chicken noodle soup when I was so sick it hurt to blink. So we know right away that these people have history. And this is only the first page, first lines of the book. The Impossible Fortress by Jason Rekulak, which is a really great book. It's so good I've read it twice, and it's a young adult novel. It's set in the 80s when computers started becoming a thing, and it really captures that sort of young adult world in the 80s. The first line is, "My mother was convinced I'd die young." And the next couple lines, just like in Kennedy Ryan's book, reinforce that. In the spring of 1987, just a few weeks after my 14th birthday, she started working nights at the Food World because the late shift paid an extra dollar an hour. I slept alone in an empty house while my mother rang up groceries and fretted over all the terrible things that might happen. What if I choked on a chicken nugget? What if I slipped in the shower? What if I forgot to turn off the stove and the house exploded in a fiery inferno? That right there captures exactly what it's like to be a teenager with a mom who's a little overprotective, and you're kind of at that age where you're like, I got this, mom, I'm cool. In Around the Bend, which is one of my books, this is a women's fiction. It doesn't start with the love story, even though there's a small undercurrent of a love story in it. It's really all about the mother-daughter relationship, and that is set up in the very first line. I stood on the cracked, weed-framed sidewalk outside the white clapboard house on the busy street in Dorchester where I'd grown up, car keys in hand, and made myself 3 promises. I would not kill my mother. I would not kill myself. And no matter what, I would not talk about that incident in 1998. So there we know that there's some secrets that are hidden. We know that this is about her mother. We know that they have some kind of beef, all in the first line. Your first line does not have to be really long. It can be really short. Like Nick Cutter's first line of The Troop is eat, eat, eat. It is the monster speaking. The first line of Beneath the Stairs is I'm back. Those short, quick lines really can grab the reader. At one of my live streams recently, a lot of people posted their first lines and we were talking about them. And the ones that I really liked, the ones that really grabbed me, were the ones that were a juxtaposition of opposites. Because when you put 2 things together that don't necessarily go together, you can really grab the reader. And you can do it in a few words or a lot of words. The first line of Lucy Foley's The Guest List is the lights go out. 2 opposites, right? The lights go out. So boom, we know we're in danger. We know this is some kind of a thriller or suspense novel right away without even looking at the cover or looking at the back cover copy. The lights go out, immediately set us up for something scary is coming. I think I talked about this book before on the channel, Lisa Jewell's Then She Was Gone. The first line is one of those opposites that I really like. Those months, the months before she disappeared, were the best months. Right there, you've got her disappearing. You've set up already for the suspense, and you're saying that they were the best months. It's a lot like The Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. So that you're setting up the reader to expect that things are not as they seem. Lisa Unger's The Stranger Inside. That first line is kind of creepy because this is also a thriller with somebody that is setting out to kill somebody else. I wait because I have nothing but time. I love that. Because what is this character waiting for? Why do they have nothing but time? Why do they not have a job? When you can surprise the reader by having opposites in that very first line, things that they don't see coming, things that intrigue them, things that leave them with questions, that creates an immediate connection because the reader wants to know why, how, what happened. You can do that with any genre. For instance, in The Secret Ingredient for a Happy Marriage, which is one of my books, it's a women's fiction, And I start off with that juxtaposition in the very first line. From the street, Nora Oban and Daniel's life looked almost perfect. So we're looking at this kind of neighborhood life and it looks almost perfect. So you're wondering, why is it not perfect? Why does it look one way? And we're already implying in the opposites in that sentence that maybe things are not as they seem. A great first line is also powerful on its own. You can have it be short, you can have it be long. It's all up to you and within your genre. When you're writing something that's a little bit more evocative and emotional, like a women's fiction, totally feel free to write a longer first line. It doesn't necessarily have to be short and hooky because certain genres have more of a reader expectation that they'll be a little bit more of a leisurely ride. You're also trying to set a mood and a tone for the book right away. Valerie Burns' Icing on the Murder, which is a cozy mystery, sets that up right away. It creates that small town feel. It creates that, I'm going to wrap you in a blanket, even though there's going to be a murder here, and take you through it with this really great small town. That's the other thing that a first line needs to do. It has to set up for the plot. It's a whole lot of work for a first line, but that's okay. I have some tips for you. And Then She Was Gone, the whole thing about her daughter disappearing is the entire plot. It's about her daughter suddenly seeming to reappear and what happened when she disappeared and whether this is a real reappearance or not. In my book, Around the Bend, the first line talking about the mother and daughter kind of arguments that they have, that sets up for the entire book, which is a mother-daughter road trip where they're repairing the bonds between them as her mother is dying. Whereas with The Secret Ingredient for a Happy Marriage, that whole thing about from the outside, Nora's life looked perfect, is the entire problem with Nora. She has this facade that she has created of her life that is not in any way the truth. And until she faces the truth, she can't actually have the life that she dreamed of. So that first line sets up the reader, sets up the story, sets up the plot. Now you're probably saying, holy crap, that's a lot for one sentence to do. And here's the advice that might kind of surprise you. Your first line is not as important as you think it is. I just said that it was, right? I just said that first line's got to be all these things. It's not as important as you think it is because it's the first paragraph, the first page even, that the reader will give you before they say, no, I'm not reading this book. I was at a writer's conference many years ago, and it was an agent who was speaking about how he knew within the first 3 sentences if this was a book that he wanted to represent or not. 3 sentences. But the good news is he didn't say 1 sentence. He said 3. Which means you have a little bit of time to grab the reader. So if we go back and we look at those same books and look at the first 3 sentences, you can see that they grab the reader even more. They expand on what's going. They kind of reinforce that genre. They reinforce the plot twist. They reinforce that whole opposites, all of those things, and they hook you even more. So if your first line is and you're feeling like, I don't quite have it, that's okay, because you got a couple more sentences to grab them. In Lucy Foley's The Guest List, the lights go out. In an instant, everything is in darkness. The band stopped their playing. Inside, the wedding guests squeal and clutch at one another. So boom, we've got something that's really set up as being scary. With Before I Let Go, he talks about the chicken noodle soup, and that kind of sets up that there is a bond between them. In The Impossible Fortress, he sets up that whole young adult setting with the mom worrying and him being 14 years old. All of those things kind of carry it forward and do some more work just to kind of support that first line and make it even more impactful. I'm not saying that your first line isn't important. It absolutely is, but it doesn't have to do all the weight of the book. It can do some of the weight, and you've got other sentences to keep it going. So how do you write a really great first line to your book? Number 1, you accept that you're probably going to have 750 renditions of it. I go back and tweak my first lines over and over and over again. I actually have a couple videos on my channel where I show you the version that was the rough draft, the version that I sent to my agent, the version that sold, and then the version that was actually published. And you can see how that first line has kind of morphed through these different versions as I've gotten to know the characters better. I've become firmer in how that book is going to go, and I've really had some time to play with it. So don't feel like you have to stick with the first line that you created early on. A lot of times the book will change, the characters will change, and you'll need to go back and tweak it. Secondly, if you can put opposites in it somehow, light and dark, evil and good, all of those kinds of things, you'll create something that creates questions and intrigue for the reader. It doesn't have to do it, but if you can do that, it really does set up the book to be even more intriguing. If you're writing suspense or thriller or cozy or any of those kinds of things, you definitely want to try to get those opposites in there so you're setting up questions for the reader right away. Third, it absolutely has to fit your book's genre. You're making a promise to the reader, and that first line absolutely has to deliver on that. Don't make it hilarious if the rest of the book is serious, and don't make it super serious and doom and death if the rest of the book is hilarious. You want it to sound like the genre, you want it to create that mood because you've only got a few sentences to do that. And here's another tip that might surprise you. I want you to try your book without the first page, because a lot of people start their books too early. They don't start right in the middle of the trouble. And they want to set all this stuff up with backstory. And I've got to explain this and I've got to explain that. And I've got to introduce my character and show you what he looks like. I want you to start later than that. Start where things have already started happening. I would say that 99.99% of the writers I work with could definitely stand to cut the first page, maybe even the first chapter, sometimes the first 3 chapters. A lot of writers feel like they have to get all this stuff on the page so that the reader cares about the character. That's not the point of the first page. The first page is there to grab the reader and leave the reader with questions. It's okay if they don't know everything. It's okay if they don't know who this person is. That's totally fine because you want them to say, what's going on? I got to read this. I got to figure out why he said this, why this creature is moving around here, why this girl is missing. You want to create questions for the reader, and you don't do that by dumping a whole lot of backstory on the first pages. So tell me, what is the biggest challenge that you're having with your first line? Are you debating between starting with dialogue or starting with action? Are you worried about making sure that your genre is really clear? Drop your question down below, or you can come to one of our live streams on a Friday, drop your first line in the chat, and I'll give you immediate feedback right then and there. And in the meantime, if you want to dive into what makes a powerful first chapter, check out this video here, where I talk about these books in a little bit more depth about their very first chapter and how that kept me glued to the page.